detention camps are government roundups of resistors in our future. It's no longer a question of whether the government will lock up Americans for defying its mandates, but when. This is what we know. The government has the means, the muscle, and the motivation to detain individuals who resist its orders and do not comply with its mandates in a vast array of prisons, detention centers, and FEMA concentration camps paid for with taxpayer dollars. It no longer matters what the hot button issue might be. Immigration, gun rights, abortion, same-sex marriage, healthcare, criticizing the government, protesting election results, etc., or which party is wielding its power like a hammer. The groundwork has already been laid. Let me just say, as far as the party, let's not forget that it was the bunch of these Republicans that just signed on to a piece of legislation that has red flag laws. A bunch of Republicans, over 100 of them. Under the indefinite detention provision of the National Defense Authorization Act, known as NDAA, the president and the military can detain and imprison American citizens with no access to friends, family, or the courts if the government believes them to be a terrorist. Well, my friends, they've already defined conservatives and Christians and constitutionalists and veterans and pro-lifers and people interested in Bible prophecy, going all the way back to the Obama administration, as potential domestic terrorists. And that's only increased, hasn't it? He goes on to write, so it should come as no surprise that merely criticizing the government for objecting to a COVID-19 could get you labeled as a terrorist. After all, it doesn't take much to be considered a terrorist anymore, especially given that the government likes to use the words, quote, anti-government, end quote, extremist, end quote, and quote, terrorist, end quote, interchangeably. Notice what he's saying there. If you're anti-government, meaning in some areas you're for the government, some areas you're against the government policy, right? No one's for anarchy. We all know that God created the concept and idea of government, Romans 13. But if you're against the government in a certain area, you're now an extremist. You're a terrorist. For instance, he writes, the Department of Homeland Security broadly defines an extremist as individuals, military veterans, and groups that, quote, that are mainly anti-government, rejecting federal authority in favor of state or local authority, or rejecting government authority entirely, end quote. Military veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan may also be characterized as extremist and potential domestic terrorist threats by the government because they may be, quote, disgruntled, disillusioned, or suffering from the psychological effects of war, end quote. Indeed, if you believe in and exercise your rights under the Constitution, namely your right to speak freely, worship freely, associate with like-minded individuals who share your political views, criticize the government, own a weapon, demand a warrant before being questioned or searched, or any other activity viewed as potentially anti-government, racist, bigoted, archaic, or sovereign, you could be at the top of the government's terrorism watch list.